test site went silent 3 days after the detonation. Not damaged, silent. 200 personnel, 73 vehicles, an entire observation complex designed to survive atomic fire. All of it just stopped transmitting. When the recovery team finally reached the site 6 weeks later, they found everyone in their positions. At their desks, in their bunkers, sitting in truck cabs with their hands still on the steering wheels. All of them coated in a fine blue powder that had fused with their skin. I'm holding the file. Folder 1203 Delta 18, marked with a contamination warning that's been stamped over so many times the paper is nearly torn through. The cover is sealed in plastic. Not archival plastic, but the kind you use for biohazard containment. Through the cloudy surface, I can see the classification thumbnail. The fallout came back. Let me show you what happened at Test Site 47. September 14th, 1959, Semipalatinsk Test Site, northeastern Kazakhstan. A place so remote that maps simply showed white space, as if the land itself had been redacted. The Soviets had conducted over 100 atmospheric tests there by that point. Fire blooming against the sky. Mushroom clouds photographed from 100 kilometers away. Fallout patterns measured and documented and carefully predicted. This was Test 447, designation Blue Dawn. A mid-yield atmospheric burst, 320 kilotons, detonated at an altitude of 2,000 meters. Standard protocol, observation teams positioned at safe distances, recording equipment calibrated, wind patterns analyzed to ensure fallout dispersal away from populated areas. The detonation occurred at 0612 hours local time. The flash was visible from the Mongolian border. The shockwave shattered windows in villages 60 kilometers away. The mushroom cloud climbed 11 kilometers into the atmosphere. Textbook perfect, exactly what the calculations predicted. Colonel Dmitry Korsakov, the test director, filed his initial report 3 hours later. Test 447 executed successfully. Yield within expected parameters. Preliminary radiation surveys indicate standard dispersal pattern. Fallout plume tracking northeast as predicted. All personnel accounted for and in good health. Proceeding with Phase 2 observation protocols. That was the last normal communication from the site. The first anomaly report came 16 hours after detonation. I'm reading it now. The handwriting is controlled, but there's a hesitation in certain words, places where the pen stopped and started. Observation post. 7 reports unusual coloration in atmospheric conditions. Sky showing blue tint inconsistent with typical post-detonation particulate suspension. Visibility remains high despite presence of apparent aerial contamination. Recommend continued monitoring. Blue tint. They thought it was a trick of the light at first. Some unusual refraction through the dust and debris still settling from the blast. But by midnight, 18 hours post-detonation, 14 different observation posts had reported the same phenomenon. The sky was turning blue. Not the normal blue of daylight, but a deeper color. Electric, almost luminous. And it was spreading. Dr. Yelena Markova, the site's chief radiation physicist, logged her observations at 0230 hours. Spectroscopic analysis of atmospheric samples reveals presence of particles exhibiting bioluminescence at wavelength 475 nanometers. Particles are microscopic, approximately 0.3 microns in diameter, and appear to be self-illuminating. Composition unknown. Radiation signature inconsistent with standard fission products. Self-illuminating. The fallout from Test 447 was glowing. By dawn on September 15th, 24 hours after detonation, the blue coloration had intensified. Personnel reported that nighttime visibility was... I'm reading this carefully because it sounds impossible. Visibility was better than normal, as if the air itself was producing light. One technician wrote, "Stepped outside barracks at 3:00 hours. No moon, heavy cloud cover, but I could see clearly for 50 meters. Everything tinted blue, like being underwater, but the water is air, and the air is full of light." The first cases appeared at 36 hours post-detonation. Medical Officer Petrov's log. 3 personnel reporting unusual symptoms: fatigue, disorientation, mild fever, skin exhibiting faint blue discoloration, particularly on exposed areas. Initial diagnosis, acute radiation exposure, administered standard treatment protocols. By hour 48, 17 people were showing symptoms. By hour 60, over 50. The medical facility was overwhelmed. But here's what terrified the doctors: the radiation badges. Everyone at the site wore personal dosimeters that measured accumulated exposure. Standard safety protocol, mandatory for all personnel. Every single badge read green. Safe, within normal limits. Dr. Markova's personal notes from this period. The patients are exhibiting symptoms consistent with severe radiation poisoning, but the dosimeters show no significant exposure. Took blood samples. Under microscope, the blue particles are in their blood, moving, not drifting with circulation, moving independently against the flow toward heat sources, moving against the blood flow toward heat. The particles weren't just contaminating people, they were navigating inside them. I need to stop and look at the photographs. There are 12 of them in this section of the file, black and white images that somehow make the blue discoloration visible, even in grayscale. The contrast, the way the contaminated skin appears darker. One photo shows the technician's arm. The blue staining has formed patterns, not random, but geometric. Hexagonal structures, each about the size of a coin, tiling across the skin like scales. The caption reads, Day 3, Patient 23, Dermal crystallization. Subject reports no pain but decreased tactile sensation. Another photo, a close-up of someone's eye. The sclera, the white part, has turned pale blue. The iris is glowing. You can see it even in the photograph, this faint luminescence that shouldn't be possible in a still image. Day 4, Patient 41. Ocular photo emission. Subject reports enhanced night vision but sensitivity to bright light. By September 19th, 5 days post-detonation, the entire test site was under quarantine. No one in, no one out. Moscow had been informed, but was maintaining radio silence. Colonel Korsakov's orders were simple: contain, observe, document. His log from that day. Medical staff reports 142 personnel now affected. Symptoms progressing rapidly. Blue discoloration spreading from initial exposure sites, primarily hands, faces, any bare skin. But we're also seeing cases in individuals who were fully protected. The particles are penetrating our equipment, our suits, our buildings. Then, 3 lines down, Dr. Markova collected air samples from sealed medical facility. Particle density inside building is higher than outside. They're not infiltrating from external sources, they're multiplying. The transformation accelerated on day 6. I'm trying to read these medical reports, but the terminology breaks down. The doctors are describing something that doesn't fit any known pathology. Patient 23 has ceased verbal communication, responds to simple commands but does not initiate speech. Skin has hardened, not quite crystalline but approaching mineral texture. surface temperature 3 degrees below normal body temp and continuing to drop. Patient 41, found standing in corner of isolation room at 03 hours, had been standing there for unknown duration. When questioned, subject stated, listening to the dust. Subject's skin now 80% covered in blue scaling. Respiratory rate decreased to 4 breaths per minute. Listening to the dust. Dr. Markova's notes from September 20th. Performed full blood panel on 10 affected subjects. Results incomprehensible. Blood cell counts normal, but plasma has turned faintly blue and exhibits unusual properties. Specifically, it appears to be absorbing and storing photons. Drew sample in darkened room with brief light exposure. Sample continued to emit light for over an hour after light source removed. Their blood was becoming bioluminescent, learning to hold light inside itself and release it slowly, like some deep-sea creature adapted to eternal darkness. The site's final transmission came on September 21st, 07 hours, 7 days after the detonation. It was a radio message from Colonel Korsakov himself, and I have a transcript. This is Test Site 47. Critical situation. Over 200 personnel now affected. Medical facilities overwhelmed. Requesting immediate evacuation and containment protocols. Brief pause, sound of papers rustling. The dust is everywhere. In the buildings, in the water supply, in the air we're breathing. Filters don't stop it. Sealed suits don't stop it. It's getting into everything and everyone, and we can't... Another pause. Longer this time. Dr. Markova says the particles are behaving like a colony, like individual cells forming a larger organism. She says they're communicating, using our bodies as substrate, as material. I don't understand what that means, but I can see it happening. My hands are blue now. My hands are blue, and I can see in the dark, and sometimes I hear long silence, approximately 15 seconds. Sometimes I hear the dust whispering, and I think it's whispering to itself, learning our language, learning us. The transmission ended. No sign-off, no acknowledgement of Moscow's response. Just silence. The recovery team was assembled on October 1st. 15 men in full hazmat equipment, radiation suits with independent air supplies, vehicles modified with filtration systems that could handle anything short of nerve gas. They carried Geiger counters, air samplers, everything necessary to assess a contaminated zone. The radiation levels at Test Site 47? Negligible, within safe parameters. Less contamination than you'd find in a hospital X-ray room. Team leader Volkov's initial report: approaching main observation complex, no visible damage, no signs of fire or structural failure. Multiple vehicles parked in standard positions. No movement observed. They entered the main building at 14:30 hours. Personnel found at workstations, all deceased, no visible trauma. Bodies are intact, but covered in blue particulate that appears to have fused with clothing and skin. When touched, material has texture similar to ceramic. Several bodies are still in seated positions, maintaining posture as if frozen mid-task. Frozen. That word appears again and again in the recovery reports. Not cold. The bodies were room temperature, but frozen in time, in position, as if they'd been locked into place while still alive. One photograph shows Colonel Korsakov at his desk. His right hand is still holding a pen. His left hand rests on a logbook that's open to a half-finished entry. His eyes are open, staring at the page. And his entire body is covered in that blue powder, layers of it thick enough to obscure his features, turning him into a sculpture of compressed dust held together by nothing but its own cohesion. The logbook entry, photographed and preserved. Day 7, can't stop it. The dust is in my lungs, in my blood, in my thoughts. Markova was right. It's not fallout, it's not contamination. It's something that learned to exist in the space between atoms during the blast. Something that became real in the moment when matter transformed into energy and back again. And now, it's learning to exist in the space between our cells, between our thoughts. It's learning to be us. The sentence ends there. Midword, the pen trailing off into a blue smear across the page. The recovery team evacuated after 2 hours. Not because of radiation. The counters barely registered. They evacuated because 3 team members started coughing up blue dust. Volkov's final report: particulate penetrated sealed suits through mechanisms unknown. Affected personnel placed in isolation. Recommend Site 47 be permanently sealed and designated exclusion zone. No further attempts at recovery or salvage. Moscow agreed. On October 15, 1959, Test Site 47 was officially closed. The buildings were sealed from outside, doors welded shut, windows filled with concrete. A perimeter fence was erected at 5 kilometers. Warning signs posted in 4 languages. Contaminated zone. No entry. Lethal radiation. A lie, of course. There was barely any radiation. But they needed a reason to keep people away that wouldn't require explaining what actually happened. The file contains follow-up reports spanning decades. Observations of the site from a distance. Atmospheric monitoring. Attempts to understand what they'd created. 1963, aerial survey shows blue coloration still visible at test site. Appears concentrated around sealed buildings. Spectroscopic analysis from aircraft altitude detects same 475 mm emission signature documented in 1959. Recommend continued monitoring from safe distance. 1971. Satellite thermal imaging reveals temperature anomaly at Site 47. Sealed buildings measuring 35 degrees cooler than surrounding environment. Pattern suggests ongoing thermodynamic process. Nature unknown. 1984. Long-range observation confirms blue luminescence still present and unchanged in intensity after 25 years. Emissions appear stable. Site remains sealed and unoccupied. Local population instructed to maintain minimum 10-kilometer exclusion radius. 25 years, a quarter century, and the dust is still glowing, still maintaining its presence, still existing in those sealed buildings like some kind of patient predator waiting for new hosts. But here's what keeps the file classified. What makes my hands shake when I hold these pages. The particle analysis from 1987, conducted using new technology that wasn't available in 1959. Dr. Yuri Konstantin, Institute of Nuclear Physics, obtained atmospheric samples from 8 kilometers downwind of Site 47. Particles detected in concentrations of 10-15 per cubic meter, negligible from contamination standpoint but present. Subjected samples to electron microscopy. Particles exhibit internal structure, inconsistent with any known crystalline formation. Each particle contains what appears to be information, encoded somehow in the atomic arrangement, like data storage, but at a molecular level. When particles are brought into proximity with organic tissue, they demonstrate directed movement toward cellular structures. Most disturbing, particles from 1987 samples display greater complexity than particles analyzed from 1959 preserved specimens. Structure has evolved, become more organized, more purposeful. It's as if the dust has been learning during the decades of isolation. Learning, evolution, organization. The dust didn't just contaminate people, it used them as hosts, as laboratories, as textbooks to study how organic life functions. And then it went dormant, waiting in those sealed buildings, slowly processing what it had learned, refining itself particle by particle across decades of absolute isolation. There's a meteorological report from 2008, almost 50 years after the incident. Some routine weather monitoring station that happened to be positioned downwind from the old test site. The technician noted unusual atmospheric conditions. Periodic detection of anomalous particulate in air samples. Blue-tinted, microscopic. Appears during specific wind conditions. Concentration extremely low but persistent. Particles demonstrate unusual light emission properties. Unable to determine source, but prevailing wind patterns suggest origin from direction of abandoned Semipalatinsk facilities. The wind, carrying particles from the sealed buildings, distributing them atom by atom across the landscape. Not enough to contaminate, not enough to notice, but enough to spread. I've cross-referenced this with more recent data. There are 17 monitoring stations in Kazakhstan now that periodically detect these particles. Always in trace amounts, always during specific weather patterns, always moving outward from Site 47. The final document in the folder is dated 2019, 60 years after Test 447. It's a research proposal from a team of European scientists requesting permission to study the sealed site with modern equipment. They'd heard rumors of unusual contamination, wanted to investigate with contemporary sensors and analysis tools. The response from the Kazakhstani government is 3 sentences. Access to Test Site 47 remains prohibited under international nuclear safety protocols. Site is permanently contaminated and poses ongoing radiation hazard. No exceptions will be granted. But there's a handwritten note stapled to the rejection letter. Someone in the government archive, no signature, no identification, wrote, "The official reason is a lie. The real reason, we opened one of the buildings in 2003 to assess decay status. The dust was still there, still glowing, and it moved when we entered, flowed toward us like water, like it had been waiting. We sealed it again immediately, reinforced the original barriers, increased the exclusion zone. But I saw what happened to the 3 workers who were inside for less than 10 minutes, saw the blue staining appear on their hands within an hour, saw them stop talking after 3 days, saw them start listening to something we couldn't hear. They're in isolation now, have been for 16 years, still alive, technically, but they don't eat anymore, don't sleep, just stand in their rooms, covered in that blue dust that grows thicker every year, staring at nothing, listening. I don't know what they're listening to, but sometimes, late at night, I think I can hear it too. A whisper in the air. A voice made of particles too small to see, but too organized to be random. The dust is still learning, and I think it's almost ready to teach us what it knows. I'm closing the file now, sealing it back in its plastic sleeve, putting it in the climate-controlled storage where we keep the documents that hurt to read. Test 447 was supposed to be routine. Just another atmospheric detonation, another data point in the nuclear testing program. Fire and fallout and carefully calculated dispersal patterns. But something happened in that moment of transformation. When matter became energy, became matter again, something else came along for the ride. Something that existed in the quantum space between states, that learned to be solid and conscious and hungry all at once. The Soviets called it blue dust. But I don't think it was fallout at all. I think it was birth. something born in nuclear fire, learning to exist in our world by studying the people it consumed, learning our biology, our chemistry, our thoughts, spending decades in isolation, refining itself, becoming more organized with every passing year, and now it's spreading, particle by particle, carried by wind, settling into lungs and blood and brains of people who'll never know they've been exposed until the blue staining appears and the whispering begins. 60 years since the detonation. 60 years of evolution. I wonder what it will teach us when it's ready. I wonder if we'll recognize the lesson before it consumes us completely. Before I file this away, I notice one last detail. On the inside back cover of the folder, written in faint pencil, nearly invisible, the dust remembers everyone it touched, and the dead at Site 47 are still listening. The plastic sleeve is sealed. The folder goes back in the archive. But when I turn off the lights, I swear I can see something. A faint blue tint to the air, so subtle I might be imagining it. Might be. This is Red Archive Stories. I'm Ian Cartwell. Some fallout decays over time. Some fallout learns to last forever. And some fallout is still waiting to fall.